Hello. Ooh, okay, that works. Wow, quite loud. Okay, welcome everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Leslie Porres. I lead policy for water and sanitation finance at WaterAid, and I'm really pleased to welcome all of you here today, not only on behalf of WaterAid, but also of the International Water Management Institute, IWMI, and also, by extension, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. We are really pleased to be moving forward in our process to design principles of a just water partnership. You're going to hear more about that. It's probably, if you're in this room, probably not the first time that you've been hearing about it. We are going to review it, discuss it, and give this chance to you to provide in-person live feedback into the process. All right, and I just said all of these things. And yes, as you said, you're hearing from me from an introduction. You're going to hear from my colleague, Alan, to sort of revise and understand what we've been doing so far. You're going to hear, I keep going the wrong way. You're going to hear from our colleague, Mariana, about literally the process that has been coming through so far and the feedback that has already been provided. And then, it's going to come back to you, and we're going to divide into tables. You're going to select your table. You're going to provide your real feedback. We're going to spend as much time in that as possible, and then when we get then towards the end, we will move into a real conversation about now what next, how do we turn this into reality? And we hope and plan that Hank will join us when he is able to depart his high-level panel where he is right now. From that, I think we can launch into it. I'm not actually going to say too much more. A lot of you hear me talk, and I can talk quite a lot, but this is not about me today. But I do want to update you on literally what we have been doing so far for any of you who have not been actively engaged till now. The process of consultations kicked off relatively recently, basically about 6 weeks ago. Hopefully many of you were able to participate in one of the global webinars that we hosted, or learned about this through some of your networks that might have reached out to you on our behalf. Because we do realize that we're a small team, and it's actually far more about who everybody else knows, who is sharing this information, and that's how we are hopeful and confident that we're going to get as much input as possible. So we have been reviewing, feedback was provided, the deadline was basically a week ago. It's a busy time, it's also summer, and a lot of people are on vacation, so we do appreciate what has been provided. The team has worked quite hard to really listen to and internalize the feedback, and as a result, we have an updated draft, and that's what we will be discussing and sharing with you today. The goal, once you will give your input, we will continue to revise, and there will be another round of global consultation where everyone can apply more feedback and perfection. The principles will then be launched twice. We're going to launch them first in November at COP in Brazil. But we will follow that up with a launch more specifically geared for our water community at the UN Water 2026 meeting in Dakar. And then we launch into the unknown once we have the principles of how next we really work with countries to understand who has appetite and how we can help them make this a reality. And then we are looking for a deadline, or sort of organizing ourselves to make a big announcement with those countries at the UN Water Conference in 2026, December, more than a year from now, which sounds like a lot of time, but also doesn't, if you're me. So with that, I'm not going to spend more of your time, because again, you can talk to me anytime, but I will hand things over to my esteemed colleague from the International Water Management Institute, Dr. Alan Nickel. He will update you more on sort of the core substance around just water partnerships. So Alan, please come.
Okay, thank you very much, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone online as well. Thanks for joining. Just a quick question to those in the room. Put your hand up if you've heard of Just Water Partnerships already. Okay, good. So about half the room, which is pretty good. Good starting point. Well, essentially, what Just Water Partnerships are trying to do is to bring financing, water resource management, and WASH together. How to make it more effective, how to make it more accountable, and fundamentally how to make it more just, particularly in light of the current situation. The current challenges we face, the climate crisis, the issues of financing, the reduction in ODA, the question of how to raise the levels of private sector financing in the sector as well. That's what Just Water Partnerships are fundamentally trying to achieve. They've been established, or the process of developing the principles has been now about 6 months in the last period. We've been developing a process of principles development. We've been concerned particularly about the challenges of the funding gap that we face, the huge 140 billion the World Bank estimates per year that is required to fill that gap for financing in WASH and water resources management. Right, okay, I can see down there, which is very helpful. We also have enormous challenges of finding ways of improving the financing balance. Whoops, wrong one. Oh, you have a whole range of microphones. I don't think this one. Okay, good, you've swapped it. Excellent, all right. Is there enough finance? One question. Is there enough capacity to spend that finance in a given year? We also know that the challenges are growing, that, as I say, climate and other risks are accelerating the need for financing in the sector. 90% of natural disasters are water-related. So we face a huge challenge. We face a financing environment that's shrinking in terms of ODA. How to improve that situation? In 2023, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, IWMI is now hosting the Secretariat of the Commission, released a report, The Economics of Water, in which they called for just water partnerships. And these are really about coordinating more effectively, creating an environment, an enabling environment, as the phrasing goes, that creates or supports the capacity to fund more effectively. But it's not just about effectiveness in terms of delivery of projects, it's also about the accountability out there, to making sure the money goes to the right people in the right places. And that means really improving the regulatory environments as well as just improving financing flows. It's how is that financing spent? And that's a real challenge when you try and improve blended finance mechanisms. So when you try and bring public and private finance together more effectively, the regulatory environments also need to improve. So the Global Commission on the Economics of Water talked about the need for just water partnerships. And what we're doing at IWMI and WaterAid is taking forward this idea, taking forward this concept. Why IWMI and WaterAid, you may ask, right? We're enabling a process here. We don't want to lead it. That's why you're all in this room as part of this process. But what we do want to do, and this is very important, I guess you could say it's a key point from my perspective, particularly as someone from IWMI, the International Water Management Institute, is to bring together WASH financing and water resource management financing. Because so often in the past, we know that those sectors are siloed, they're separated, and somehow, you know, we exist in our separate worlds and we think differently about WASH. But WASH and water resource management are intricately linked, and this is where the Commission made a very strong point of emphasizing the water cycle, the green, the blue water. The challenges facing that cycle mean that all uses of water are linked together, and we know that. We're at the Stockholm Water Week where that narrative is being repeated over and over again. But so often, institutionally, that doesn't exist at a country level or even internationally, right? Even in the UN system. Often you'll find the WASH establishment, quote unquote, speaking about WASH issues as if they're separate from the water resource management issue. But if you're from a country where there's huge pressure on your water resources, on your freshwater base, And there's massive disruption to the system because of climate change and the changes taking place in blue and green water interactions, soil moisture, for example, and evaporation losses changing as your ambient temperature increases, then you know that these systems are connected. So thinking about financing and institutional management has to be also brought together. So that's really what Just Water Partnerships are trying to do. They're also thinking clearly about policy environments and making the policy environments, supporting policy environments in countries to build coherence. So that agriculture is thinking about energy, energy is thinking about wash delivery, and wash delivery is thinking about environmental quality. Sanitation is also extremely important, thinking about how to maintain quality, but also how to maintain sanitation systems that are effective, cost-effective, and sustainable. And that ultimately is a shift, a key shift in this process from over-exploitation to sustainability. So it's really also a fundamental change in the narrative that these Just Water Partnerships are trying to achieve. And that's where I think we're sort of pushing hard to make that transition. You know, everyone talks about sustainability, but it's actually translating it into good decision-making, particularly at a country level, that's critical. But the key word, and I'm actually going to be convening the Just table over there, the key word in all of this is just water partnerships. Because so often the normative, the challenges of where finance goes and how you make sure that the bottom billion or the 10% who have the least access to water for agriculture or water for wash services, domestic water, how you find ways of ensuring that they are lifted up through investment. And that is critical for this notion of just here. It's fundamental to the Just Water Partnership. Those justice-based guiding principles are very, very important. So we're very keen to have all your input on this. I don't know how many in the room are from government. Maybe you could just pop your hands up if you could. Okay, so 5, 6 of you. It's a very important environment, obviously, for government to be concerned and considering how to improve financing and investment through Just Water Partnerships. But it's also important for others, those at the basin scale, the regulatory scale. I don't know any basin organizations in the room. I know there are 1 or 2 people who work on basins in the room. But it's also about basins because countries, water doesn't stop at the border of a country. It flows, it enters through all sorts of integrated basin systems. And we have to think also about their involvement in these partnerships as well. The private sector, as I said, I think I put it on the slide anyway, 1.7% of financing comes from the private sector. It's a tiny amount. And yet the public-private issues that surround these challenges we face, the climate impacts, the degradation of resources, the demand on resources for food production, for example, are public issues of public concern, issues that affect us all. Collective action issues fundamentally. Collective action requires partnerships, and building that collective action is fundamentally what we're trying to do here. So all of those different institutional groups have a stake in this, and that's what I hope very much, we hope you can all provide your input on during our discussions at the table level. Why start with principles? Okay, it's a slightly elongated process. We have another few months to go. Principles help bring, let's say, coherence to this process. It helps people to understand where's their starting point in all of this. A set of principles grounds this process in an agreed, if you like, ideological or philosophical direction, which is key to making institutions work more effectively together. Because if you're all thinking in a different direction, it's a hard partnership to build. So principles are central to this process, and that's why we're starting with them. There have been examples in other sectors, energy, where they've proven to be critical to reducing fragmentation at a country level particularly. So we're bringing those lessons learned from other sectors into this process as well, and that's a key part of the consultation, is to get as wide an input as possible from different sectors. But finally, I think this is my last slide almost, finally, it's not just good words that make change happen, right? So it's turning these principles and this idea of just water partnerships into something really substantial, and we can only do that with you. And we can only do that with countries, and countries are critical to this process. So, you know, we encourage, we hope very much that we can also bring you on board, but at the same time provide more than just a set of principles, but also tools that can help in establishing and help in identifying the right kind of partnerships, because they're not going to be the same at every country level. They'll be different, right? And every country has a different governance environment, so the Just Water partnerships will need different governance arrangements. We're hoping there will be a core set of countries that can help take this forward. We'll be, you know, co-developing checklists and self-assessment tools, all of these to establish, to support the process of establishment, but also to understand, to measure and monitor how Just Water partnerships are performing and how they're succeeding in trying to achieve a more effective financing environment, but a financing environment that directs investment to those most at need and those parts of the water sector most at need. So I think that's all I've got to say. I hope that was semi-coherent. At least the beginning was a little bit garbled, but I hope you've got the sense of the occasion. The main point is you're here to provide input, right? So I think that's almost it for presentations, but then we hand over to Mariana, who'll really dig into the process. Thank you very much.
So, hello everyone. Hi. So I'm going to walk you very briefly through this consultation process on where we are today, why we're here, and what we've done so far. So this is what we are calling the first phase of this consultation process. So it's very much an opportunity we're looking into defining what we mean by Just Water partnerships, and also these principles that we are putting out there for discussion. So we've done, we have an online consultation process. The deadline, as Leslie mentioned, ended last week. We kept it open for 3 weeks. We worked hard on disseminating this, this process as an opportunity to influence the development of these principles or the co-development of these principles. So it's there highlighted in yellow. And at the same time, we've had a number of countries doing in-country consultation. Ghana, Nepal, Madagascar is just some of these examples where we also hope that this is going to be planting a seed for the future mobilization and the future establishment of Just Water partnerships. Either the establishment or the application of this Just Water partnership lenses on existing multi-stakeholder coordination processes. And today we're there on the third circle, where we are having this in-person consultation here in Stockholm, and very pleased to see a full room, and where we are going to be further refining these principles. You're going to see as part of your activity, of this consultation process, this World Cafe activity we're doing, that we started with an original version, a draft version of these principles, and based on the feedback that we've received in these 3 weeks, we've already got a redrafted version, a more final-looking version. But what we are looking to get from you today is further feedback on this to make sure that we have strong principles that are inclusive, diverse, but also very grounded on reality, and that they can be translated into action going forward. And that's before we then kick off the next phase of the consultation in September, where we're going to be looking much more into refining them and translating them into tools that can make sure that they go from principles to reality before they're ready for their launch. And just so you know, very briefly, how we got to this draft. We didn't just sit down and come up with all of these principles, but we undertook a desk review of existing processes out there. We know we are not inventing, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We know that there's a lot of work that's been put into this. So we reviewed similar processes, similar initiatives from the water sector, but also outside. We mentioned here the Just Energy Transition partnerships as well. We learned a lot of lessons from that process. But overall, they are grounded on the human rights framework, especially the human right to water and sanitation. and also in the concept of water system justice. And that's also key on the report of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, where this idea was put forward. And basically, in this consultation process, and it's the same question we are asking you here today, the main questions are, is this principle helpful in guiding the implementation of JWPs in your context, especially if you're coming from government, from the country level? Is this helpful? And what, if anything, is missing, or what's unclear in this principle? Are there any risks? What are the unintended consequences of these principles? And you see there a title of 7. They are also spread around your table so that you can understand them further. I'm not going to read them, but just so you know, the main titles, the headlines that we've got there. So very briefly about the online survey that we've done so far. So we've reached out to nearly 500 institutions, and we know that many of these are networks that also put a word out there. They're also helping us spread this initiative and this process that is ongoing. And we've heard from 34 countries, and there's some graphs there. You can see the level of intervention of the institutions that responded. Many coming from the national and local level as well as subnational level, and mostly from the African and Asian Pacific region. This is key. I think we've benefited from the Global North being on holiday at this time of the year, so we've got some more diverse participation there. And also the stakeholder groups, so the kind of institutions that responded so far. So you see that it's very strongly civil society and national NGOs participating at the moment, as well as international NGOs, and that shows on the principles that that you see that this revised version. It's a stronger cause for justice, stronger cause for accountability, and your feedback will be important in that regard too. So some of these cross-cutting insights from the feedbacks that we've received from the online survey is some of the recurring recommendations or recurring asks is not surprisingly that we're very explicit also about the inclusion of sanitation. You know, sanitation is integrated across all principles. Community monitoring, so the institutionalization, not just to be careful about having tokenistic participation. How can we make sure there's meaningful participation in just water partnerships? And also that we need to be clearer on the benefits of getting government engagement, because this is supposed to be just water partnerships. At least at the moment, there is no expectation that this is going to be a global process. This should be very much an in-country, a national process. So what are the incentives? What's the added value for the different stakeholder groups to join this process, to engage in this process, but also for governments that should be leading and really supporting this process. And that we also come up with more measurable targets. And this has to do with, you know, we talked about the definition of just, but also how are we going to measure equity, and strong calls for more accountability, and how this could look like in reality. So also some of this cross-cutting feedback on the gaps is how do we make sure that these principles are not just ideals? How can they be actionable? So we cannot just have good ideas here. They need to be clearly linked to mechanisms and incentives to make sure that they are translated into reality. The how question, and this is I think important also for when you're reviewing these principles here. So we know, and Alan also mentioned how the just water partnerships are going to look different based on the different contexts from country to country. Yet there is a call that we are clear on the how, more clarity on the governance, who leads, who funds. We know that multi-stakeholder processes cost money and human resources. So who holds the pen, and who holds whom to account? That's another question that came from the feedback we've received. and that also that we need to do here a good job of demonstrating the added value of just water partnerships and these principles. And then in terms of a strategic framing for this, how can we respond to these recommendations? It's a suggestion that we create, besides principles, that we also create an implementation guide showing how governments and partners can act through planning on planning, regulation, financing, monitor, and legislation to make this a reality. And also that we position JWPs as an opportunity to operationalize existing commitments, human rights, SDGs, climate frameworks. They need to be strongly combined and seen as a way to guide and direct discussions and investments in water and sanitation. So now we kick off our consultation. So you're already sat across 8 tables. We thought it was a sign that we have 7 principles and a definition of just and 8 tables. So in each of your tables, you have a facilitator. Let me just ask. Yes? 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 Very good, all covered. And if you can stay on the tables where you are right now, because we are going to start this activity where we are going to get your feedback. And we are going to have to be very strict with time, because we are stopping the consultation at 12 so that we have time for the facilitators to report back. So we're going to have 2 rounds of about 13 minutes. So you start where you are, and then when we let you know that time is up, we'll ask you to choose another table. So right now we have the definition of just and the different principles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You'll find out which one that is. Don't worry. And yeah, so. The titles of the weekend, yeah? Yeah? So it's more blessings actually, is doing here the definition of just, yeah, don't worry. We've got another job for you. And here, principle 1, can you read your principle? Oh, of course, there's also an online, we also have people, this is a hybrid session. So this discussion is also happening online. And online, we're going to have all principles at the same time. No, not on yet. Yeah. The next table, please. This got louder.
Hi, colleagues. So this is Principle 3, Inclusive and Participatory Governance. So everything about youth, women is out, so we need your inputs to come and put it in.
See, Alan, so that's where you are right now.
We don't have a facilitator, but we have the assignment, and we need French translation, by the way. Finance anchored in public value and sustainability. So everybody interested in money and finance, you join us.
Your facilitator's coming. Sorry about that.
Hi, we have Principle 5, Transparency, Integrity, and Accountability.
Hi, and this is Principle 6, Knowledge, Learning, and Adaptive Implementation.
We're in Principle 7, Climate and Development Integration.
Thank you. So, yeah, we can get started now. You've got bright minds, flip charts, and pens, and we'll let you know when your time is up.
But
More
we are the
blessings here.
just we are the just people, but we need more people because he's gonna go away and she's going away. So you're staying, okay?
Staying? Okay.
But please, people, come through to the just table.
Let me just add. So we're about defining just. Yep. Okay. Good. So, are we getting it right or not?
So I fired you and promoted more blessings just because she came running from the airport, and we were not sure if she was going to make it.
But I suggest we do it.
You do it together, yeah?
Yeah. But let's get more people.
I'll get you more.
And then flip it.
Yeah. There you are. Take the blue or the green. Up to you.
Are there enough? There aren't enough.
Hello. Good, how are you doing? Good.
Interesting. Just over here, please. Good. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Bella, lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Bella, where are you from? Who are you with?
Just a Drop, so we're an NGO working from the UK, but yeah, working at 6 or 7 countries now.
Excellent. Maybe we can all scribble our names and affiliations on a sticky.
Yeah.
Just so we have a few. So, blessings.
My name is More Blessings. I work for WaterAid and based in Pretoria, South Africa. Yeah.
And as I tried to say at the beginning, I'm Alan Nichols. So I work from London, but I'm attached to our Ethiopia office. Kind of weirdly, but I'm working on policy and politics around water.
Great.
Yeah, political science is my background. So I'm interested in what you do strategic stuff, going on around the world. Oh, we're going to stick them on separate. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. Blessings. Go ahead. More blessings.
Okay, so this is us. We're not getting more people, so we can get started. Okay, cool. We'll get started. So, colleagues, welcome. Nice to meet you all. Sorry, I need to remember your name again.
Sorry, I'm Bella.
Hi, Bella. Okay, and Eric. Hi, Eric. Okay. Okay. So we've got. This is the definition. I will just read quickly. It just water partnership secures water and sanitation as human rights and common goods, and ensures equity in access and outcomes, balances power in decision making, recognizes diverse forms of water tenure and knowledge, and safeguards resources for future generations. So we need to. We have 4 questions, 5 questions to speak to as we are trying to answer this. The first question is, what do you agree with in this definition? Okay.
But it should, in my view, should be ensured well-governed equity. There should be a measure of control and fairness. So as you see in the US,
like the safeguarding for future generations is you can do a lot of planning for now, but if you're not planning for the future, then it's not going to work. Yeah. But then we can only safeguard it as far as our knowledge of what's going to happen in the future is what we have, and the knowledge that's being shared by all sectors, because no one really knows. We can only see where flooding is affecting now and put in predictions of where it might impact in the next few generations. But
Can I add to that? Nice point. I think that therefore our understanding is just needs to be intergenerational. Because we, also responsible for longer term than just our current, whatever, tiny 5-year delivery eventually.
exactly.
Environment, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about equity, I'm just thinking on the just, is there a common understanding of what just is? Maybe we need more clarity. Your just, my just, is woman in the village, her just, who defines it? But the point I was trying to raise is that how it's understood by everybody who is coming to the table, and that is what we are talking about.
But also like the education that everyone knows that they get a vote, because some people might not see that they have a voice in this, but everyone does, because it is a human right, and we're all humans that we're trying to protect and serve.
Does that mean just has to also include, as in the sense of knowing what you need, like knowledge,
Yeah.
creating the capacity to claim your rights?
Yeah, it's sort of like knowing what you need and knowing that you can also, you should have access to that as well.
Can I just respond? There's a lot of people who don't know their rights.
Yeah.
So just knowing that they have a right to have that or to claim that, a lot of people don't know that.
No. I agree.
I was wondering, because from that perspective, I would want the word participatory somewhere, but I'm not sure where to put it, because I think
Hello? Just letting you know that in 5 minutes we have to rotate, okay?
Someone didn't have their coffee this morning, so we'll take them in. Yeah.
2 minutes. 2 minutes, everyone.
enjoyed the week so far? No, I just arrived. You just arrived. You will.
Okay, so time is up for this first round. Great to see that everyone is so engaged, but it's time to move to the next table, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great to meet you both.
Okay, thank you for moving. Start. Pick another principal, please. Climate table.
I'm preparing a proposal with Mr. Frank von Steenberg.
Finance. Okay, you're moving there. Alexandra. Okay, guys, time to move around. Thank you so much for moving around. Now you've got 10 minutes again. Thank you. Oh, we need more volunteers to the climate table. Hello, this is your 5-minute warning. 5 minutes. Two minutes, so if you can start wrapping up. Okay, so time is up. We're going to start asking facilitators to report back. So if you can just pause or wrap up your conversations as soon as possible. But time is really up. Thank you. Okay, great discussions. And we're going to start reporting back now. We're doing it a little bit out of order because our facilitator needs to run very shortly. So we're actually starting with Principal 2. If you can introduce the principal, and then you have 1 minute. Thank you. 1 minute. 1 minute. Yeah, the... help you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. In 1 minute, we're talking about national leadership with shared ownership. What people liked about this principle was that we have now leadership at multiple tiers of government. The first iteration focused more on national government, whereas the second iteration includes multiple tiers of government, especially local government leadership. Folks also felt there were a few gaps, like what is the difference between who owns and who leads these partnerships, and it can be different or the same. Government should lead, people found, but be accountable to co-owners, and co-ownership wasn't very clear. The last sentence people felt was a bit confusing, and it wasn't clear which part of central government should play the leading role, especially, you know, is it at the ministerial level or the operational, technical? We got a little bit into the weeds there.
Does it mean your time is up? Okay, okay. If you can just wrap up, thank you. Just need to.
Limited capacity to drive it. So we need to be very clear on who owns, who co-owns, and prioritize how to integrate into existing commitments and priorities. And we need private sector support.
Excellent, thank you. I feel like I've got more power because my microphone is loud. So now we're going to go to table 7, climate table, because that facilitator also needs to run. Thank you. And if you need to be on time, then you've got 1 minute.
I'll do my best. We had 2 people here, so we've done 2 full pages. So thank you to those 2 people. Yeah, we had a couple of points that carried over actually. One was in terms of what was missed. There was broad agreement. There was a lot here that we think we've got right, but a couple of things that are clearly missing. Nature, environment, maybe not called out as strongly as we could here. Like very focused on climate, and also nods to climate finance. What about biodiversity finance? It's not all about climate. We must include biodiversity and nature in that as well. A challenge of is this just a relabeling of existing principles? Is this actually to what extent is this actually different to just like a normal a multilateral policy on finance, for example? Also comments around is to what. Let's go deeper into the analysis on JWPs. Like what analysis was done is that what are you mentioned lessons that were learned, but what are they? Let's go into those a bit more. How is this? What's the actual mechanism of this? Is it some kind? Is it something you sign up to, like a compact, or is it actually some? Is it what sort of mechanism are we going to use? And then our second discussion looks at the importance that this needs to be multi-stakeholder, particularly looking at, for example, avoiding siloing within governments or government ministries, and how does that learning permeate as well? I think were the main points. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And I suggest now we go to Principle 1 table.
Okay, so I'm in Principle 6, Knowledge, Learning, and Adaptive Implementation. And these are the key points that came out from our group. From the definition, there's a need to add space and place, multi-level, multi-stakeholder, different forms of learning, and formal, non-formal, or multi-systemic. To expand the definition of marginalized to include disability, gender, diverse knowledge and systems, and neglected communities, as it was only mentioning women and girls. On multi-level feedback groups, feedback and learning loops. Who is monitoring? What tools of monitoring? Who decides on the system? To add practically in the multi-level planning from national, but to also expand to local community. But there was also a suggestion to keep the principle simple and include selling words that attract funding. To think of it as a broad principle. And the next stage now will include all the wordy things, and to be consistent in the language being used around the principle. And the final is to have a clear definition of the key terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take it
Who
next?
wants to go next? Alex, next to you. Alexandra, thank you.
So we had Principle 5, transparency, integrity, and accountability. So both groups agreed that obviously the enforceability of it would be the most challenging. That's probably the case for, of course, a lot of the principles. But this was also the principle in the feedback from the online consultation received the strongest support in terms of getting the basis for this principle right was the most important to the overall delivery of just water partnerships. So maybe focus on a couple items in the 45 seconds we have left. We did discuss that it was important for these principles to really be embedded across all partners, and maybe also starting with private sector as well, that in terms of breaking silos, it's not just about the financing mechanisms, but it could also be about what partners operate, in some of these contexts, and how can those principles be embedded in the global operations of some of the private sectors that work around water issues. So that is something that came up. And then in the second group, we dissected more the concept of transparency and oversight on the citizen element, like citizen monitoring. Some colleagues shared that that's going to be very dependent on local and national contexts, because it can be there can be some challenges in terms of being critical of your government, whether municipal or national. Okay, so that's very locally dependent. And then on oversight, making sure that that was really independent, third party, and that the information from that oversight in terms of report was fed back to citizens and the water users affected. Thank you.
Thank you. If you can pass to the next person.
So we spoke about Principle 4 on finance anchored in public value and sustainability. I think one of the main things that both tables agreed on was that the definition, again, need to echo another table there, needs to be simplified. It felt like they said there are too many words put together, checking too many boxes, but not communicating it in a more direct way, especially something like finance. Secondly, there was a lot of discussion about cost recovery. It's in the definition, but sort of, acknowledging that there is no recovery of OPEX, and sort of inequality in provision of utilities, internal water pricing, all of those things need to be in some way acknowledged in a simple definition as well. And all the things. And then funding of processes was brought up, which is slightly different to what's written down there. So looking at how we can fund global water partnerships that support national initiatives. Governance was brought up. It was felt like governance was missing a little bit in this. Is money flowing into the right places? So looking at the principles of locally led adaptation, particularly around recognizing differences in sectors, water, energy, food financing versus WASH, very different. I think that was the gist of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you go to the table?
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. I think we had an interesting discussion also on Principle 3, inclusive and participatory governance. Let me start with issues of legitimacy. I think that was one of the big things, right? Who has the legitimacy to claim that they represent all of these groups? And we have seen elements on that previously in other sectors, like, for example, RED. So who actually has that representation of indigenous communities or youth, or who? So how to organize that and how to reflect it on the principle was one of the key issues. There's also here one very simple one. Let me refer to it. I think the list of stakeholders that are reflected in the principle as it states could also include researchers. Also, apart from the who's and the representation and legitimation for them to act, there's also issues of when. So I think the principle should bring a little bit more or the colleagues feel that the principle should reflect more the whole process of decision making. So that one was captured here. There's also feel that this should connect better to the principle related to governments, as this has to be very clearly stated that this should be government-led processes, that they are, you said, the ones writing holding the pen. So that connection can be done better. And there was an interesting discussion as we had one of the representations of the private sector. And as the principle reads, it seems that the space for CSOs and CBOs is much greater than those ones for the big businesses. So there's an interesting discussion that and if whether big businesses should have their own category somehow, making sure that they are led or also linked to avoid reinventing the wheel with pledges on climate agenda related to transition plans for economies. So for companies, sorry. So I think that making that link with existing platforms that also include big businesses is, it's one of the feedback of the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Fauzia now, yes? You need to pass the mic.
Yes, rapid. Can we do this?
So we worked on principle 1, which is equity, inclusion, and water justice. So we agree with the fact that the principle outlines and is clearly linked to human rights, and it mentions informal settlements by defining who the vulnerable groups are: women, youth, and informal settlement. So we kind of agreed in terms of that. So we also looked at, we agreed with the meaningful participation clearly spelled out in the principle, and also reducing inequalities when it comes to that principle. So those are the things that we did agree on. What we felt was missing was the cultural context and localizing this principle. How will that look? It's not clearly spelled out, so that's what we identified. We came out with a number of risks. We're looking at just water partnerships, has to do with accountability and issues of holding people accountable. So if that is the case, we're also looking at availability of resources to be able to do that. So if we risk accountability, if countries on at the national level, they're able to say, well, to integrate and do all that, we need resources, but the resources are not available. So in terms of reflection, I'm moving down here, we're thinking of how can institutions be made accountable for the partnership. We also identify the need for data. So for example, for vulnerable groups, how many people are we looking at in terms of data to be able to say we are adhering to the principle? We need data. We're also looking at defining what meaningful is. It's value-laden. How do we define meaningful in terms of participation? Then we are also looking at joining agendas, because we're looking at different level of stakeholders. So there's also that risk of who would be held accountable for actually making those decisions. We're thinking that we can add, when it comes to separating the two, the principle looks at one end in terms of reducing inequalities, focusing on resources and investment. Then the second part of it is also looking at addressing power asymmetries. So we're thinking that if these two can be separate in principles, that would be more focused. Thank you.
Thank you. So now, last but certainly not least.
Well, thank you very much. We covered a large chunk of global philosophy in this session, so I'll do it in 30 seconds. Just definition. Well, there's one thing about the governance of this notion of equity and just, which is critically important. We need to think about how to balance interests in our interpretation of the idea of just, and that goes to an issue of scale, right? Are we talking about just household-to-household justice, or are we talking about justice at the scale of a country and balancing sectoral needs and uses of water? You know, so all sorts of big challenges there. There's also a time challenge. Intergenerational equity and justice is really important here, particularly if we're thinking about water and blue water and all the big challenges raised by the Global Commission. You know, we've got to think timescales, so well beyond our current immediate 5-year turnaround of the SDGs. Knowledge is absolutely essential also in this understanding of just, so because people need to understand, or they should be aware of what needs and rights they have in claiming those rights. So I think knowledge is absolutely critical as well. Participation as a kind of part of the procedural nature of justice and justice is key, because otherwise it remains just simply an abstract concept And we know there are lots of abstract concepts floating around out there, excuse the analogy. And in that context is also important, because just in one country context isn't just in another. We talked about free basic water in South Africa as an example. So that goes back to the knowledge debate and deliberation challenge. So each country, each context needs to think through this very carefully. And that's why these principles are a starting point, right? They're not the be-all and end-all. They're a starting point for those country conversations that are really, really important to have. And I'll just end on this point about nexus. So again, you know, when you talk about just individual justice, institutional justice, sectoral justice, but also country-to-country justice, sharing river basins, all these issues are very much embedded in nexus challenges, balances, and trade-offs. So although you may want to give everything over there, you'll find over here there's a trade-off involved, and that trade-off has long and short-term consequences. So water, and this is my final point, deep down embedded in all this is the notion of water systems justice, which is a critical challenge, and I'll hand over the microphone.
Thank you very much, everyone. And you're going to hear back from us. We're going to redraft these principles, and looking forward to that. Last word, simpler, but intergenerational justice, gender, more stakeholder groups, that would be fun. And now to finalize this process.
Yeah. Other do you have the, can we advance it? Yes. Well, so many microphones. I'm here to, okay, so we do want to say thank you. This is an important part of the process, and we were also illuminating that this kind of conversation is something that we don't get when we do strictly online. So there is the value of bringing you all together and actually getting into the groove together, and we thank you for being here. We thank you for giving us your time when there are so many other events in competition, but we also see that as an indication how much interest and importance there is, and really it's going to take all of us and all of our included networks to really build this together, right? With that, you can see we have, I'm going to introduce somebody that basically needs no introduction. You know, Henk Ovink has been, you know, a strong champion and supporter, and Henk and I together, you know, brought a year ago. Yeah. A year ago, we had a breakfast about JWPs and what would it take to move this forward. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know, were any of you at that breakfast? Yeah, yes. Those of you who were there, the outcomes that we got from that breakfast were literally, we have to have a definition, we have to have principles. And look where we are a year later. Yeah. Right? So these things, they might not happen always at the pace that we want, but they are happening, and it's because of all of us, and it's because of feedback that you continue to provide. But of course, the principles are a step along the pathway, and we do want to think about what's next, where to go from here. And I'm not going to pretend to have the answers, but I'm going to hand it over to Henk to share some ideas, some thoughts, and some big visionary thinking about where will we be at this point next year. We have ideas, but Henk, you can take us even further, I think.
Okay, thank you. Ambition set. Let's manage that a bit. Thanks to you, we are now here, but thanks to Leslie, we're here. Because she really, yes, yeah. Because going from last year, there was no report yet of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water also. So we had a breakfast without a report. But already had this anchor of just water partnerships in the input outcome of the UN 2023 Water Conference. And then as part of how our findings of the Global Commission could really take shape and materialize across the world, across all the diverse voices and spaces. And Just Water Partners is at the heart in the context of how valuing, governing, and financing water works. And then Leslie at WaterAid, and with the support of her organization, but also IWMI and others, she really pulled and pushed this off towards more convenings, both in person and online. And now we're here. And thank you so much for all your feedback on where we are. I don't know where this ends in that sense of where we, this is not a UN process. We're not going to yellow text and red line and etc. That's not what this is about. But finding common ground is going to be key across all of us to ensure that we can work with it. And then as it's not set in stone, working with that will actually make it reality. And I think there is not only a need for that, we feel it out there, but politically and in society, there's a real opportunity coming forward. I was not with you because I was a part of a high-level panel with indigenous peoples from around the world, giving voice to that. I think there is a relationship definitely here with the justice and the definition and the process, which would be relevant. But next year is the 2026 UN Water Conference, and in 2028 there's another UN conference, and then depending on if the UN collapses or not, there will be a post-2030 agenda. So anchoring our findings in the context of shaping the agenda for 2026, but also forging those partnerships that are just in the context of what that conference wants to achieve, and also knowing and building on the interactive dialogue themes that were just agreed upon on July 9, that where you could say the principles that you discussed and have improved now resonate across all those themes, and some are stronger than in others. So working closely with the co-host, I think is the next step to ensure that what you brought and what Leslie and the team are leading is anchored to that preparatory process, but also is felt and heard and amplified into in the 2026 UN conference. And I wonder, but that's not to answer now, but for you to chew on too and give feedback to us as well, what would be critical outcomes of that conference in the context of the partnerships? What are catalytic opportunities that you see? Who could help us shape that, organize that, bring that together, and use the 2026 conference as that platform to bring it to the world, give it a life, but also a future? And I think really making sure that that stage is used is also what the UE and Senegal are looking for. This is what they need to make sure that that conference is a success. So that's one. And the other part is the institutional context. So it's the boring side for some, although I fell in love with it a bit. Although it's very tough, we all know that water has a very tough relationship with the institutional context multilaterally, because there's none. There's a sliver of it, you could say, if you compare it to others. But water is anchored institutionally in all these multilateral environmental agreements, for instance, but also in others. So figuring out what institutional context you would need from a partnership perspective, and knowing that that institutional ambition, whatever that is, still needs to be explored, is an ambition from the outcome of these conferences. Because moving towards post-2030, without anchoring water into that system, we're lost as a world. The water cycle needs a home, whatever that home is. Could be many homes, could be one, could be everything. So I'm not talking about an agreement or something not predetermined. But from the partnership perspective and the principles and the vision as an impact coming out of this, what is it that you would need? So next to bringing the partnerships to the conference and forging them there and showing what the result of that is and the impact across the teams and the outcomes and really bringing that as a result, it's also the input for the thinking on what a framework, the institutionalization could be. And I think there's a lot of capacity in the discussion you had in discussing these principles that could really be super beneficial for a discussion that still has to be started up. So I would say those two ambitions for sure. And then, of course, I hope this family grows, so the partnerships grow. And I want to thank you for your contributions, and Leslie and the team for making this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We've definitely hit time. I think Henk has left us with really big ideas and thoughts to really bring together all of the concrete feedback that you've been bringing to us, and then how we embed this in the UN 2026 process and the post-2030 process together. We welcome your ideas. I think you know me, but if you don't know me, you definitely will know Alan, you will know Mariana, you will know other members of WaterAid and IWMI. Please come forward, share your ideas. This is all of ours, right? So please, thank you, and stay tuned.